Hi, everybody, and welcome to our complimentary webinar today, which is brought to you in partnership with Alvaria, Auscontact's national silver sponsor, and Call Design. Today, our session is called Preparing Your Contact Centre for Economic Downturn, Strategies for Recession Proofing. In the spirit of reconciliation, Auscontact acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, and community. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples here joining us today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and during that time with today's guest, Jeremy Marriott, we hope to spark some interest and engage you in the conversation, as well as provide you with some ideas and tips to take back to your respective businesses. To round off the session, we'll have a Q&A at the end of the webinar, where we will love to actually get some interaction and hear some questions from you. I'm Fran Southwood, CEO of Auscontact, and I will be your moderator for today. While we're waiting for everyone to join us, we'll just quickly run through some housekeeping with you. As I said before, the best way to get benefit from these sorts of sessions is through interaction. So we're really looking for that from you. There's no need to take too many notes now, because we will actually give you a recording of the session. And, again, you'll have the opportunity to review that. For the way to interact, we want you to use the Q&A button on the control panel. You can ask questions, you can make contacts for Jeremy or myself from time to time. Remember, we'll have a full Q&A session at the end of the webinar, but if you're anything like me, I think of a great question, and if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. So type them as you go along, and that way they'll be front of mind. Equally, if they're relevant to what Jeremy's actually taking us through or talking about at that point in time, I'll actually jump in and ask those questions for you. So make sure you put them down and we can make sure we get the most out of the session. If you're listening through headphones or speakers and have any issues with your internet connection, you'll see on the control panel, you can actually click that raise hand button. So if you click on that, one of the team will come and help you. Alternatively, in your registration confirmation email, there were a number of phone numbers and access codes. So you can actually revert just to that and click on that way. And you'll be able to resolve it that way. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Jeremy Marriott. We're lucky enough to have Jeremy here today. Jeremy is the head of regional sales at Call Design. He has extensive experience across the region, and I'm really looking forward to hearing today his insights from multiple organisations and multiple verticals. So Jeremy, I'm going to hand over to you, because I know this topic is something that everybody's really starting to feel here in Australia. We've had our first full cycle post-COVID, full financial year, and there are some real movements, not just in Australia, but in the rest of the world, that we're kind of watching eagerly. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jeremy, and let's get our session underway.
Good morning, everybody. I seem to have run into a technical issue all of a sudden. I don't know whether everyone can hear me. Fran, can you give me a thumbs up if you've got
I can hear you.
Fantastic. I told you that storm that was arriving has just arrived, and we're taking part of it. So very briefly, everybody, firstly, thank you so much for the opportunity. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm the head of regional sales at Call Design. And I've been around the industry for a long time. I've been nearly 30 years in the contact centre industry, and I've always been focused on customer engagement and efficiencies within the contact centre. In fact, I started my journey at Centre World by repairing headsets back in the early 90s, and came up with a way of repairing what was one of the first efficiencies in the contact centre ever, which was headsets. Economic downturn. Work.
I think Matt, we've got a few issues with the audio there. I think that storm over in Perth might be impacting a little bit, but I think we've got you back. We'll just see how it goes. I'll let you know if it drops out again.
Fantastic. Thank you. Hopefully it'll be over in 2 seconds. outside of work, you'll see my my little picture of one of my ponies on the side. I'm very involved in horse riding. I play a bit of polo and a bit of polo cross, and I love roller skating as well. So I'm you can be you can be one way or the other. You can be retro roller skater, and that's one of my passions. So I thought I'd just do that to introduce myself as we move on to talking about what's going to be forthcoming with a recession or not a recession. Regardless of whether we end up in an official recession or not, we're certainly going to see signs of economic downturn. In New Zealand, they're already in a recession. In Australia, we haven't gone into a full.
I think we've got a few technical difficulties happening here.
Hey, Fran, I'm still there.
Yep, I can hear you now, Jeremy. Sorry,
Okay.
I think you're going to need to start that slide again. We missed that beginning.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So regardless of whether we end up in official recession or not, we're certainly starting to see signs of economic downturn in Australia. And as a result, all the businesses and employees and their customers are going to be impacted by what's coming and what's already here. It's well and truly on the way. Over the next 45 minutes, I'll unpack what's coming, the impacts of those challenges on both the customer, the employee, and subsequently on your contact centre. And what we're seeing already are increased costs of living, reductions in job securities, more financial hardship is likely to be coming. We've seen a continuing drop in the Aussie dollar and still got this thing from 2 or 3 years ago called a COVID hangover. I don't think I'll get an argument from anybody when I suggest we've already seen a significant increase in the cost of living over the last 3 years. I'm sort of sure that many of you will attest to some of the pains already being experienced in the business. Certainly on the employee front, securing, maintaining the right staff still remains a massive challenge, and it's set to get even more challenging as we go through it. Work from home preferences mean that people don't want to pay the extra dollars to commute anymore. So off the back of COVID, we've got these challenges where people have decided that they're not going to give up 2 hours a day to go to the office and get home from the office, and subsequently they're not going to put petrol in their fuel tank to go to and from, because of increased cost of living is making them feel that pain. Staff are pushing for wage increases in line with inflation, and dollars are rapidly becoming the top priority for staff as they look to keep up with the rising cost of living. We're witnessing people move to, and this is the tree change piece, we're witnessing people moving to outer urban rural areas to reduce their monthly expenses, their mortgages, their rentals and the like. And that was a massive impact, and it's already starting to be seen on the worker pool for inner city businesses and inner city contact centres and the like. So those that are looking at back to office type roles and offering back to office type roles are really finding a reduced number of candidates when they go to market. On the customer front, we've seen reduced buying power caused by inflation, which means that people are looking more aggressively at things like churn. They're looking to review their spending, resulting in downgrading of cover, downgrading of services, and now they're beginning to present more and more overdue and delinquent accounts as we go further forward. When it comes to the reduction in job security, we'll unpack it from an employee point of view and from a customer point of view as well. But from an employee point of view, it's likely we're going to see less attrition because people don't want to be the first person in and the last person in and the first person out from an employee point of view. We don't want to be sitting at the end of our 6-month probation when we're in recession, or at the end of our 3-month probation when we come to recession. there's more financial stress coming from job security, and there's lower morale in the workforce, which all results in things like cultural challenges and loyalty impacts. People up and move as soon as the dollars are a little better somewhere else. So I suppose the key takeaway that we're finding at the moment there is that that dollars are becoming the most important part of a consideration to stay or go. From a customer point of view, we're seeing that outbound contact centres in particular, it's a much harder sell. People are going to scrutinise a lot more. The sales cycle is generally quite a bit longer, which results in more interactions and more calls and more volumes into the contact centre in order to get the same revenues. Contracts are shorter. People are buying contracts that are 6 month and 12 month, as opposed to signing up for multi-year agreements and early terms. And they're deferring decisions. They're not making changes as easily and commencing new journeys from a customer point of view as easy, because they are concerned about what the future may hold. Hardship. So we're also seeing in the marketplace, some of these challenges around financial hardship impacting within your workforce and within your own teams. So wellness is a big factor as we go into financial hardship. Wage pressures. We're sitting on the back of a couple of years of not a lot of change in wage, but this inflation factor that's come along has been pushing up wages and pressures on wages quite aggressively. So people are very, very concerned about managing their everyday expenses, and as a result, looking to see improved remuneration. And the more financial hardship, the greater the UPL, so the unplanned leave within the contact centre, with people taking sick days, people not able to come to the office because or come to work for whatever reasons, generally related to financial hardship. Customers, we're seeing more calls as a result of financial hardship. So people picking up the phone, calling up, looking for an extension, a time to pay, a promise to pay, deferring payment, and the like. And same with the outbound, we're having to chase customers more and more in order to get a promise to pay or get a payment made, or retain that customer. So customer retention as a result. There's a reduced discretionary spend within the customers, which means we've got downward pressure on a number of our revenue streams and sales scenarios. We're having to increase our collections teams and bolster within contact centres our collections teams and our retention teams. And we're also identifying that there's a greater likelihood of fraud, which is generally follows any downturn, economic downturn. And one of the things that we've noted with fraud as time goes on is that traditionally a lot of fraud was done digitally or electronically or scammed over through the web. That's taken a little bit of a change over recent years, and the contact centre or social engineering is becoming one of the more prevalent ways of committing a fraud. It's a lot easier to convince an agent and put pressure on an agent to give away some privacy details or some other details than what it is to actually break into a system on the internet. As a result, we're seeing more attempted frauds coming through into contact centres, and they're not necessarily the frauds that you would expect, where people are reaching into a bank or reaching into a financial services institution and trying to move money around. It may be simply reaching out to your local to a local council to get a little bit more information to gain another 10 points of ID or 50 points of ID in order to collect a 100-point ID, so that they can then go and commit a larger fraud in a different place. So everyone falls as part of that chain. We're seeing that Aussie dollar continued to plummet. Some of the experts at the moment are suggesting that it could get as low as 60 cents in the next 6 months, which is, whilst it's great for tourism and it's great for export, it's going to have some serious challenges on our employee base. So, there's going to be less overseas holidays coming out of Australia, out of Australian employees, and that is challenging because what it does is it means that it's short breaks and not long breaks that employees take. And that has a compounding impact on leave liability. So if people aren't taking holidays, your leave liability continues to grow, and that's a challenge. Conversely, you'll also end up with burnout in the contact centre because people are not taking leave as much as they need to. And from a customer point of view, it puts a complete change on the competitive environment. So customers, all of a sudden, you've got international businesses which are a little bit more expensive, Australian businesses which are a little bit cheaper. It makes it a little bit a very, very different competitive landscape moving forward for those businesses, and it either potentially increases volumes into the contact centre as a result. And finally, with these hurdles that we see, we're going to talk about the COVID hangover and some of the pains associated with that. Once we get through, we'll then go into some of the mitigations that can put in place. But from a COVID hangover point of view, we've got this massive leave liability that people are still carrying forward. So a lot of organisations are still carrying leave liability for 3 years of people taking next to no holidays over that period. We've got to do something with that. And as we move into economic downturn, the ability to convince people to take a holiday when they can't afford one is not that easy. So people are not actively, our employers are not actively putting their hand up to go on holidays at the moment. We also have a challenge associated with EBAs and industrial relations. So a lot of organisations, due to COVID, deferred negotiating enterprise bargaining agreements, and all of those are sort of coming to a head right now. We've got this downward pressure on costs within businesses, but we've got this upwards pressures from inflation and the like. And that's really forcing us down the path of having to negotiate at a time that prices are continuing to increase. The cost of living is continuing to increase. So this need to negotiate EBAs right at this point in time is putting a lot of upward pressure on wages. There's a competency challenge as well post-COVID. So we saw over the last 12 months in particular a massive amount of change within organisations and people moving from jobs to job and the like. They've come in and they've got 2 months, 3 months, 6 months competency. They're not the competent staff that we're used to that have had several years tenure. And these people are now going to be responsible for handling the interactions that we need handled over the coming economic downturn, which means that we're not going to be as efficient with these staff. They're going to take longer to handle the calls, and we're going to need to find ways to mitigate that. We also have the pain around return to office. A lot of organisations are starting to mandate some level of return to office, so they're looking to do a 1 day a week, 2 days a week, 3 days, 4, whatever it happens to be. But employees are now pushing back quite aggressively on return to office. They've developed this, or I like to coin a phrase, I call it the life-work balance. It's come out of the back of COVID. Traditionally, we were looking at a work-life balance, and we had to revolve around our work. Now, over the last 3 years, we've become accustomed to revolving around our life. If we want to go to the school fete, the school play, we do so because we can. We don't have an hour's commute to the office and an hour's commute home from the office every day. If you add that up, That's if you're going in every day, that's 10 hours a week that you have to give back to your employer. Staff are just pushing back on that and not enthusiastic about it at all. And it's becoming harder and harder to retain employees if you have a return to office mandate. On the customer side of things, we've got these supply chain issues that are still hanging over us. So we've got issues with delivering in time, which brings failure demand in. We've got people picking the phone up and saying, "Where's my order? Why hasn't my fridge arrived?" And you're creating additional volumes as a result of having supply chain challenges. We've got a higher cost of goods, which is putting more pressure on people to be frugal and sensitive in the way they manage their funds. And people have got a reduced buying power as a result of COVID and the new position that we're in. So unfortunately, the higher cost of goods has pushed and made it harder for people to make decisions to purchase and the like. So there are three key pillars that I like to talk to about how we're going to tackle this economic downturn. The first one is engaged in and empowered employees. So engaging and empowering our workforce is critical to the success of any business as we move forward into economic uncertainty. What will it deliver? Well, it reduces our attrition, which is a pain point. And I'm sure if I'm not preaching to anybody here that about attrition, everyone understands the pain associated with it. It improves wellness once you get into that engaged and empowered employee position. It builds loyalty within your teams, and it builds loyalty to your business. So people are not as quick to up and move from one business to another. It improves competency, and it gives employees that life-work balance. From being proactive with your engagement is the next of the pillars. It's making sure that you remain front of wallet. You need the customer. You're the first person they pay. They're the first, but when you reach out to the customer, they're the first person in front of mind that they're going to pay if they get their paycheck in. They're going to make sure that you get your bill paid first. It improves customer intimacy, and it removes failure demand. So if you reach out when you have when you can and when you need to, stops 2, 3, 4, 5 calls coming into the contact center at a later date. So particularly when it comes to collections and the like, and it reduces the cost to serve as a result of that. So if you only bring in deal in voice, obviously it's expensive. If you can start to use multiple channels, you can reduce the cost to serve, but it also reduces the cost to serve because you don't have as many failure demand calls coming into the center. And then finally, the final pillar is to become more efficient, work out how we do more with less. So how do we mitigate those staffing shortages and actually do what we need to with the staff that we have? How do we admin overhead and get rid of some of these tasks that we're continuing to do continuously and getting in the way of handling customer objections or customer inquiries or customer engagements? How do we improve our efficiency? Make sure that we do the work that we need to quicker and better. And how do we prioritize our work to make sure that we work on stuff that needs to be done today and leave the stuff that doesn't need to be done today until another point in time, and make sure we make all of those SLAs. So how is next question? And so we've got a number of different strategies and opportunities within each of these pillars, and I'll start on the engaged and empowered employees to start with. Flexibility is critical in any engagement and empowered employee framework. And flexibility isn't just work from home. Traditionally, people started to look at flexibility and think, well, it's the work from home scenario. It's not. It's the what, it's the where, and it's the when. The what, the where, and the when. Flexibility in what employees do. Do they do web chats today? Do they do voice today? Do they do retail work this morning and contact center in the afternoon? Do they do some back office interactions and the like? Do they handle complaints? Do they handle sales, etc.? So being able to provide flexibility is critical. Where they work. So do they work from the office? Do they work from home? Do they work from a blended environment, etc.? Offering that opportunity is also paramount to a successful engaged employee, engaged empowered employee. And when they work, giving shift flexibility for people to work at certain times of the day that suit them. And it gives you, and it opens up a great opportunity employees that you may not have used in the past into your workforce. An example of that is work from home, stay-at-home mothers. If they can do split shifts, fantastic, and they can fill out certain parts of your business. If they can do 20 hours a week and only 20 hours a week fits with their schedule and fits with your schedule, then there's massive opportunity there. Farmers' wives, so people that were traditionally regionally based and not able to actually get other employment, but happy to jump on the phone for 2 hours or 4 hours a day every day. They are generally they're generally university educated. They are generally have English as a first language. They have better NPS and greater and greater efficiency than a number of other employees, and they're happy to do small shifts and fill in gaps here and there. So flexibility is critical there. Gamification is another arrow in the string to attack the empowered employee engagement scenario. Sorry, I got my tongue wrapped up there. So gamification has traditionally been a little bit a bit of a soft measure, but what we're seeing now is engaging employees is one of the key ways of keeping them employed with your business and not moving on. And why is that? Because they feel part of a team. You can play games together. You can create games that pull people together as part of a team. They feel that they're part of a team, whether they're working from home and they haven't seen any of their other stakeholders. They feel like they're letting others down if they put their hand up to move on to a new role. So this gamification is something that's being used quite effectively in a way to keep people as part of a team and keep them fully engaged. Moreover, we've started to see people use it to bring people back to the office or bring employees back to the office. So by providing better outcomes for prizes, for trophies, for badges, etc., for being or for picking up an office shift as opposed to picking up a at-home shift. So you can incent people and incent the behaviours that you're looking to achieve by having people come to by having gamification reward coming to the office more than working from home. Recognition, one of the big things that we've seen recently is there's some real challenges around people feeling a sense of belonging and a sense of empowerment in businesses. They feel like they're a number on a spreadsheet. So recognition and gamification can be used to present really well recognition with leaderboards and the like, but it also allows performance management dashboards and the like to be presented to executives, and you can get high fives and all sorts of executive engagement and visibility and recognition right down to the individual employee level from senior leaders within your business. And finally, on that empowered and engaged employee position, we talk about mobility. And mobility is one of the key factors. It allows employees to use their mobile device wherever they happen to be. They can at any point look at their shift. They can apply for a little bit of leave. They can swap a schedule with somebody else. And they can move their break around or whatever they want to do without having to go home. Log on, pick up their laptop, and try and work out whether they can take leave next Wednesday or in the pillar for proactive customer engagement. Outbound was an interesting is an interesting world. It was thought a couple of years ago that outbound was going to be just about dead for outbound voice. Voice contact centers were going to become more and more digital. What we've found is that as we go into economic recession, outbound campaigns and compliant outbound campaigns are absolutely critical to successful collections and successful interactions with customers when it comes to trying to reduce inbound. If you make outbound calls, you can reach out when you have capacity and when best time, and manage when is the best time to get hold of each of the individuals. So you can identify and you can schedule and plan to make sure you've got the right number of people to get to the right number of outbound campaigns whenever suits your business, and whenever it's best for the for the customer to be able to take the call. And it doesn't have to be a voice call. It can be a complete channel of choice for outbound. You can go outbound by SMS. You can go outbound by chat. You can go out by any scenario, any channel that you choose these days. But having it consolidated in a single campaign so that you may make 1, 2, 3 interactions with a customer.
We've lost you a little bit there, Jeremy. Hopefully it kicks back in. Oh, you're back in. We just heard that. Yeah, we lost you a little bit when you were talking about that preemptive sort of outbound approach and engagement with customers.
Okay, so proactive customer engagement, critically important to consolidate outbound campaigns. So making sure that you're compliant and you're not breaching any of the do not call registers, obviously, but also the harassment challenges associated with how many times you can call on any given day, and maintaining channel of choice. So some customers will prefer you to engage over SMS or over email. Others will prefer to engage over voice. But where possible, you can automate. Where possible, you can automate. More importantly, where appropriate, automate. So use SMS and use chat and these sort of scenarios with bots as an effective way to proactively outreach. But don't use automation where it's purely for your business's benefit and not for the customer's benefit. We've seen automation be deployed because it's cheaper, not because it's a better experience for the customers. And so we strongly advise and strongly recommend that you go down the path of making sure an automated interaction is one that is effective and appropriate for all parties. And proactively reach out to high risks. So when you start to see there's so many tools around from with analytics these days, and data science teams within businesses, when you start to see that you have customers that are looking to go into hardship or are looking to go into likely default, to reach out early and put in place plans to stop the calls coming back at you in a week or a month's time. Do more with less. So the do more with less one is much what everyone's been talking about for quite some time and putting a lot of pressure on everybody to within the contact center industry. It's like, how do we automate this? How do we remove this? How do we do that? How do we make it cheaper for us to deliver our service to customers? Real-time optimization is probably one of the pearls in this little crown at the moment. So real-time optimization gives you the ability to do things like harvest idle time. So if you've got employees that are sitting there idle, leverage your WFM system and leverage your real-time optimization system to identify where you can redeploy that person in real time. Whether that person, if they're sitting in idle today or at the moment, let's look at what the queue depth looks like. Let's look at what other queues are doing. Let's look at their skills, and automatically let's move them from one queue to another queue, or let's pop a bit of training to them. So never have to plan for training again in your workforce planning. So if someone's got some idle time and they've got a backlog of training that's not been done, let's present them with some training to get that out of the way, so that we've got them on the phones later in the week. But real-time optimization is one of the real opportunities for efficiencies within contact centers in 2023 and 4. Automate your HR functions from a contact center point of view. So by tying your WFM system to your payroll and your HR system, you take away the need to go back and validate that every time someone's applied for leave, it's gone into the payroll system, and it's gone into the HR system, and it's gone into the contact center system or the WFM system. What we want to see is that burden removed, so that once an employee applies for leave, it's automatically populated from the HR system or from the WFM system, whichever way you choose to do it, but it's populated across all systems in a single interaction. So that level of integration and tie them together is one of the more efficient ways as we move forward. We want to leverage the enterprise workforce as well. So the enterprise workforce is those not just in the contact center. Let's have a look at when we've got employees, and this comes back to flexibility as well. When you've got employees that are skilled in the back office and skilled in the front office, skilled in other tasks, at peak times, let's overflow or let's use or schedule some of these work back office people to handle voice calls. We saw it happen during COVID and how efficiently it worked during COVID, where you would bring branch office workers onto the phones because the branches were in lockdown. So having the agility and the flexibility with your workforce planning practice to be able to drag other parts of the business in to handle times of peak utilisation. Clear your back office backlog now. So what we're starting to see, and one of the ways of getting visibility of this is having workforce planning across your back office. But if you've got a backlog of back office work, get on top of it now, so that you've got capacity in your contact center or in your team to be able to leverage those resources to handle voice calls as the volumes increase, as we see more hardship cases come in. We see more delinquencies come in. So get rid of any of that back office backlog so that you've got voice capacity as required. And as we wind out, because I know I'm getting pretty close to my time at 10. So there we go. So what have we got? Optimize breaks. Using your WFM system, you can go forward and optimize your breaks automatically on a daily basis. Every morning, you can automatically run a break optimizer that looks at any changes that have happened in the way the contact center is operating on a given day, and will automatically move people in and out of breaks, or move breaks accordingly, so that you get the best coverage over the course of the day. And then finally, from a do more with less point of view, one of the big areas that we think there is a significant opportunity for businesses is using propensity analytics. So managing your and viewing your propensity to default, propensity to churn, customer propensity to defraud. So leveraging artificial intelligence and some of those type tools to actually sit down and have a look at. Over the last 1,000 defrauding cases that have happened with our business, what are the similar traits that have caused or have identified these as likely defraud options moving forward, or propensity to defraud moving forward, of people likely to churn. So we can basically, again, we can listen to the calls using intelligent analytics, identify what the attributes of a call that may result in customer churn. Propensity to resign is another one that we're seeing lots of interest in. So how do we look at employees' calls over the period and identify what attributes identify a employee that is potentially going to resign, and how early can we identify those, and then put steps in place accordingly. So cognizant again of time and understanding that there is a few questions starting to come through. I'll put my hand up and ask anyone with any questions. If you want to throw them over the fence, Fran might ask me those questions, and see what we can do to give you a little bit of insight.
Thanks, Jeremy. No, I think that there's so much information there, and the do more with less. I think for me, we're almost at that point where we need to be saying, actually, it's time to do differently with less, right? We've got to really almost start rethinking that habitual kind of practice, because all of the stuff you've talked about today is really about how do we take this look at our environment and actually say, critically assess it, and think about those opportunities to shift and move and empower. I love your pillars. I think that for anyone listening, and I know we've got a number of people that actually registered for this session but couldn't attend because they want to actually get the recording. But I think there's some real power for me. Any organisation could pick up those pillars and actually plot their environment against them. And there's an opportunity to almost think about the contra or the counter component. What are you doing that is not giving flexibility? What are those limitations, or what are those barriers that actually they could start rethinking? Because some of this is about, a real historic approach to how it is they think about the environment. You talked about flexibility. Flexibility is a really interesting one, and I think you explored that really, really nicely, because it's not just about work from home, but certainly at the moment, work from home kind of gets, the up in lights kind of tension for flexibility. But if you think about flexibility as a concept, the contra is, well, how do I demonstrate flexibility, or what does it look like in my environment? How do we empower and trust our people enough that actually flexibility gives us the results we're after? And I think that the contact center industry itself is one of those that I look at, and I think some of the things we still do and the way we still do them, we've been doing it for 20 years, yet our environment is so fundamentally different now. And the days of micromanagement just because we can, actually it's not working, right? And in fact, we almost need to turn it on its head and say, why do we care? Why does that matter? Just because we always have, what could we actually try and fail fast if it doesn't work? But what does true flexibility give us, particularly to support some of those other components, attrition, engagement, some of the challenges with people that stay too long, tenure can be a challenge, right?
Yeah.
But I'd love to pick your brain a little bit about gamification because I find it a really interesting one. And you touched earlier on a cycle of EBAs, when we've got a lot of our members who are in areas or industries that are quite heavily unionised. And gamification can be one that actually throws up some real curveballs with unions, particularly where you're incentivizing things like adherence, attendance, and performance results. I know one organisation that had we had some fun and games at Fair Work because of some of the things we were potentially incentivizing through gamification. And
Yeah.
this concept of, well, what's fair? If someone's sick and can't be a part of that, is that fair? So I'd love to hear a little bit about where, if you're hearing any challenges, if you're seeing organisations do gamification really well, because there are some real hesitancies for some industries with that pressure around incentivization and what it actually can drive with that union conversation.
Certainly, certainly, and so the first thing I'd suggest there is that gamification is effective when you incent the behaviours that deliver the outcomes that you want, as opposed to incentivizing the the outcomes. So so if you gamify average handle time, or if you gamify adherence, or you gamify some of those things, they are actually just the measures you're gamifying. They're not actually the behaviours that give you the outcomes. So we strongly suggest that you gamify the behaviours that deliver the outcomes. Otherwise, the other areas that we suggest that really come into it around gamification are you don't have to run it as a leaderboard type scenario. You don't have to always present it as one versus another. It can be one versus themselves. So you can actually give people empower them to see how successful they've been from this week to next week to the following week. So you move away from some of those union pressures that you have, which are considered A, privacy, and B, what's fair, and the like, and showing everyone's performance against each other. So you take those leaderboards away. Gamification also does some other really interesting things. So rather than showing everyone's scores and everyone's outcomes, you can actually do things like just give people badges for achieving a particular status. So if you've done you've done a training on a particular new product or the like, you become you get a gold star attached to that, or you get a trophy attached to your avatar and the like. So you become a guru amongst your peers because you've completed this training, completed that training, you've done this particular task or whatever it happens to be. So again, gamifying things like training delivers an educated and competent agent, which then delivers an AHT reduction. So we're not gamifying AHT, we're gamifying doing the training, and that delivers the AHT rewards for the business. And that's, I think, comes back to that key principle with gamification, is that if you gamify the outcome, all you get is people doing unnatural acts in order to achieve the outcome that you want, and they'll find a way around it, and you get all this union pressure and the like as well, because you're scrutinising effectively performance managing the team in a public fashion.
I think that's a really nice distinction. So thank you for that. I think that works really well. And, agree, there are a lot of very competitive people that work in this industry who love nothing more than to actually improve on their own personal states. Probably another way to look at it too is about those team goals, isn't it? You can kind of, depersonalize or individually take out that individual personalization, make it about the team and the group, as a whole. So I think you're right. There's some real opportunities there to, again, think about your outcomes as opposed to the actions, and what are the behaviours you're looking for. Probably some of the other things there that, you've got some potential opportunity to really think about. Flexibility, we've seen some changes to legislation around the country, particularly with relation to psychosocial safety, and that whole well-being component. And certainly some of the cases that are being tested with Fair Work include things like work pressure, type of work, the amount of work, all things that actually on face value, a lot of organisations are really struggling with how do they manage their obligations and their liability, but what are the types of levers they could potentially pull that actually give them some wins there? And if you think about flexibility as a whole, it certainly actually contributes to building this two-way obligation. This, we're kind of taking some of the pressure off the organisation to create an environment that people can participate in, as opposed to simply be instructed and kind of directed within it. So flexibility for me actually connects to some of those other challenges in the current environment that are get worse.
Yeah, certainly. We have found that it's become more and more critical to have a competent and effective workforce management practice in most contact centres these days. Traditionally, if you were sort of sub 100 seats, it was purely workforce management was purely an efficiency play, which was like, how many bums can we do this work with? How many can we take out in order to do this level of work? Now we've come at full circle, and it's you can't just put an Excel roster up on the lunchroom wall anymore. People need that visibility and need that ability to move their shifts, change their shifts, and for that to automatically populate through to their the overall schedule, and then through to the HR system and payroll system, so that we don't have any of this fair work oversight, because we know when people worked, we know they didn't breach their EBA, or we know that they didn't breach their better off overall test, or we know, because we've got those checks and balances in place. And even though they have the flexibility, they also have the ability to, and we also have the ability to maintain that flexibility or manage that flexibility in such a way that it keeps within those guide rails that the business needs to, in order to remain in effect with legislation and all of the oversight that they need to do. So it's become more critical for businesses from 20 seats through to 20,000 seats than it ever was. It's no longer just here's an Excel spreadsheet, as I said before.
Yeah, definitely. And Elizabeth's made a comment here about the changes to work hours for international students. It's had an impact. The other thing that's been, really for the last 18 months, 2 years, has been the changes to casualisation within the working environment as well, and what that means and what it doesn't mean. And obviously we're going through a whole lot of industrial change at the moment, with a push to, make further changes to that, to workplace legislation. So it'll be even more important as it continues to, remain at kind of that forefront. I want to touch briefly, I know we're getting close to time, but you talked a fair bit about the opportunity within that proactive customer engagement landscape. And for me, it goes back to the importance of organisations really understanding and knowing their customer, knowing their needs now, but also knowing what's next, to be in a position to actually build those proactive campaigns, really tap in and optimise an outbound capability as such. And again, whether it's about utilising outbound as a way to divert inbound traffic, whether it's about tapping into things like concierge, etc., as a way to actually manage expectations of behaviour from customers. But you know, there is more and more instances where outbound as an option, or you know, as a channel choice for customers makes a whole lot of sense for organisations. So are you seeing good progress in organisations shifting? Are you seeing? We're seeing lots of conversations about people needing to. We're probably seeing less of organisations stepping in and really actually building strong business case or use cases where it's working for them. Are you seeing a bit of a shift there?
We're certainly seeing a little bit of a pirouette, where people were moving away from outbound as a channel and now starting to turn and come back towards outbound. Certainly not as much in the voice space as they are in outbound other interactions. So outbound SMS and outbound messaging and automated outbound messaging or automated assisted outbound messaging, where we'll send an SMS out to say, hey, we know you missed your payment, or you've got a payment due. Would you like to pay it now? Click here. There's obviously some concerns to be managed there around pushing blue links around with the spam and fraudulent SMSs that float through the world continuously. But in-app is very, very authenticated in-app interactions are very front of mind for a lot of organisations. So where you're pushing out to a messaging service within an app that they already have on their phone, you're coming through as an authenticated interaction. Where you're talking about transactions that are lower than sort of $50, $60 or payments that are lower than that, you don't want to be pursuing people with humans. You can't afford to pursue people with humans, and all you need is a promise to pay, and away you go, or just an extension to pay, and then the auto payment goes through in a day, a week, like so. We've certainly seen a pirouette towards proactive outbound engagement, and again, if you start to apply the analytics, and I think this is where it ties together, which hasn't been around previously, and that's using the propensity analytics that exist to identify customers at risk, customers likely to churn, customers likely to default, etc., and leveraging that data to create the campaigns to reach out to those people at the time that you most need to, or you're going to have be the most effective. And I think that's the next step. Is now that we've got AI in the marketplace, and you've got analytics that are able to render and identify this in a very timely fashion, reaching out is the obvious next step.
And I agree. And again, just got a comment here from Elizabeth about customers questioning the legitimacy of outbound calls. I couldn't tell you how many times I've had my calls from Amazon and the rest of it in the last fortnight, let alone the last 12 months. So I think we touched on scams a little earlier and the increase in identity fraud, etc. There is definitely a greater level of awareness within the community, but it just means organisations need to think differently and more strategically about what is that combination of outbound interaction, whether it's an outbound call because they're following up on something that then is teamed with some sort of PIN or code or whatever through some sort of other messaging system that can actually provide that assurance to customer. Because you're right, Elizabeth, it is absolutely rife. And I used to joke when people would call from my old organisation and say, hi, I'm from such and such agency. Before we go any further, can you please give me your name, your date of birth and your address? I was always astounded by the number of people who said, yes, here it all is. So there's this greater level of awareness that means organisations just need to think differently about how to ensure success or increase likelihood of success with those sorts of engagements. And as you say, you're not seeing the predominant growth in voice, but you are seeing it in some of those other channels. Jeremy, I am mindful of time. I think I could sit and talk about this stuff all day long. I hope everybody who's been on today has enjoyed it. Obviously, we're going to send out a recording and we'll see if there's some of the content from your slides you'd be happy to share with those that attended today. I think there's some really strong opportunity in the messaging and the content from today that our organisations can go away and really think about where do they fit within those pillars, and how is it that they could actually rethink and think differently about some of those activities that they continue to be challenged by in an environment where those pressures are not going to ease up anytime soon, as far as budgets, external environment, customer challenge, and the rest of it. So thank you again, Jeremy. You've put your details up there, so I'm assuming that means you're happy for people to reach out to you but with any further questions. But thanks everyone for attending. Hope you had a great session, and we look forward to the next one. Thanks, guys. See ya.